Good morning and welcome to In Vivo, the Express News live interview series. I'm Liz Teitz. I'm a reporter here at the Express News covering water and environment, and I'm joined today by Robert Puente, the president and CEO of the San Antonio Water System. We will be talking all things water today, but the most important part is y'all's questions. So please use the Q&A function on your screen to submit questions and let us know what you'd like to hear. Thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome.
For folks who don't know, you've been with SAWS for quite a long time. You've been in the Texas water world quite a long time. Tell us a little bit about how you got into the industry.
Well, I was a practicing lawyer, but I always had a goal of serving in the Texas legislature. As a matter of fact, I told my wife when I was dating her when we were 17, she was 15, that I was going to be in the Texas legislature. So it's something I always wanted to do. Once I got there, I looked at the different committee assignments. I thought that what I could get as a freshman was not attainable. So I kind of pared it down and chose to be on the water committee. And the first few months were very, very, very boring. But the last month, the catfish farm issue for a lot of people that have lived here in the 1990s know what that is. And that was a person drilling a well into the Edwards Aquifer and was using a quarter of the amount of water to raise catfish that the city of San Antonio was using. So since then, I have been very, very interested in water and stayed on that water committee during the entire 17 years that I was in the legislature.
And you've been with SAWS since 2008, is that right?
Right. Another 17 years at SAWS in 2008. So happy to have been there for that period of time. Employees like the stability. Our employees like that stability because it's hard for them to really get going, have different issues addressed when there's a constant change at the very top.
Absolutely. You mentioned the legislature, and we have just heard a lot during the last legislative session earlier this year about Texas's water situation, the supply, the demand, how dire it is in some parts of the state. Can you talk a little bit about what our situation looks like here and the position that SAWS is in?
Well, it is true. It's dire in some parts of the state. We have a very, very big state, water rich, a lot of rainfall in East Texas. As you go west, much, much more dry and very little rain out in West Texas, where essentially it's a desert. We're right there in the middle, probably a little bit closer to the desert part of it here in San Antonio. But I'm very proud and happy to state that San Antonio has secured its water security for decades to come. We can get into more detail about that, but we have done certain things in the last few years that have gotten us to that point where we are not in the same boat, the same situation that the rest of the state is in.
Talk about some of those things in recent years. I think you're talking about Vista Ridge, perhaps, and maybe some of the other efforts.
Correct. So when I first got to SAWS, our big issue was water supply. How do we meet that supply? Because we are continuing to grow. We were growing back in 2008, and we're still growing at a very good pace in 2025. So one of the first things we did was the Seguin water supply project. That's Carrizo water coming from Gonzales County and making its way all the way here to San Antonio. It's about an 80-mile pipeline that was built by the cities of Schertz and Seguin. We were going to build our own pipeline, but we decided to rent their pipeline and rent capacity in it. So that water is moved in their pipeline and we pick it up here in Bexar County. That was one project. Another project was our desalination plant, where we're taking groundwater, water underneath our feet that's too salty for livestock, agriculture, definitely for consumer consumption. Clean it up, put it into our distribution system. It tastes and looks just like Edwards water chemically and taste, which is very, very important for our consumers, but also for our pipes. And those two projects still were not meeting our needs. And the big project that you mentioned earlier was the Vista Ridge project. That project came online in 2014. And so we've been started in 2014, but online in 2020. And so that is really the bedrock now, along with the Edwards Aquifer, the foundation of our supply.
We actually have a question from a viewer that relates to the aquifer, so I'll ask this. Austin asks, with heavy reliance on the Edwards Aquifer, how can SAWS balance withdrawals against recharge rates to prevent overpumping and ecological damage?
Well, that question, I think we answered it already by the projects that I mentioned. If you look at our supply portfolio, water coming from the Edwards Aquifer is now only half of our supply. We have Trinity Aquifer, Wilcox Aquifer, Carrizo Aquifer, underground storage of water, recycled water, all these different projects push down our reliance on the Edwards. And so that balance that he talked about of recharge and withdrawals from the aquifer is at a point where we are very sustainable. And not just SAWS, state legislation from the 1990s that I was involved in dictated how much the city of Hondo, city of Uvalde, other users, agriculture users can withdraw from the aquifer. So there's always a balance between what goes in and what comes out of the aquifer.
It sounds like, so much focus has been on water supply projects. When you look at the horizon, what are the next big projects and what parts of SAWS operations do you see those falling in that are really looming?
The great thing about our water security is that it's now based on things that SAWS controls. Unlike Vista Ridge, for example, we had to go all the way to Burleson County, Milam County, Burleson City, to get that water supply over here. So there was a lot of controversy, a lot of pre-planning that we had to do to get that. Same thing with Church Seguin, water from Gonzales County. But these next projects to meet our growing demand are totally within our control, and that is the expansion of our local supply of Carrizo Aquifer right here in Bexar County, and the expansion of our desalination plant, again, that's right here in Bexar County. So for the next few decades, to meet demand, it's within our control, and we don't have to have those controversies that we have had in the past.
You mentioned desalination. I get emails, not infrequently, from folks saying, we have so much water in the Gulf of Mexico. Why isn't SAWS going to build a desalination plant and treat Gulf water? Can you address that?
Yes. By the way, if we do that, our bills will quadruple. First of all, it's very expensive to move water. When you go to the grocery store and you buy a case of bottled water, it is heavy. And it takes a lot of energy to move that water. So to move water from the Gulf Coast all the way over here is very expensive. And why should we if we have so much water right now under our feet? There's an ocean of unused water under our feet, and that's desalination here in Bexar County. So why should we go to the coast to do that? Once you clean up that desal water from the Gulf Coast, what do you do with the waste? It's usually a 9-to-1 ratio, 9 gallons of fresh water, and then you have 1 gallon of a very, very, very salty brine, salty water you have to get rid of. How do you get rid of it? Where does it go? And so that's another big environmental issue. If you're on the coast, you just put it back in the ocean. But here in inland, you'd have to find a way to dispose it. Again, that would be very, very expensive.
We have a couple more questions coming in. Let's see here. We sometimes hear people saying the city should stop approving growth because of our water supplies. Can you talk about what power SAWS does or does not have when it comes to development and regulation?
Well, we don't have the authority, ordinance making powers or anything to limit growth. If an entity, whatever it is, whether it's an individual homeowner, whether it's a business, whether it's a developer, if they're wanting water from SAWS and they live or that is within our certificated area by state law, we have to provide them with water. So we can't dictate growth in that way. City council does that. But our philosophy, for example, has been that if you are going to grow, if you do want development, you, the developer, pay for it. So when you see a brand new subdivision out there, the developer has paid for all of the water lines and wastewater lines that are connecting to all those homes. They build all that infrastructure. Sometimes we even require them to build a above ground storage tank because that development needs that kind of pressure. So growth in our situation will pay for itself, but as far as whether it should grow or not, it's not in our purview. City council and the state legislature can address that if it needs to be addressed.
Okay. We have a couple questions relating to rates. So let's just start with a quick overview. I know you are have not raised rates in several years, but are potentially looking to ask City Council to approve some rate increases in early 2026. Can you talk about how that comes about and why that is?
Well, Liz, not only have we not raised rates in the last 5 years, we actually lowered rates in 2013. Yes, we lowered rates in 2013. If you're a residential customer in our service area, your rates went down. So if you look over the last 5 years and you average it out, your water rates today are lower than they were 5 years ago. That probably is not going to placate a lot of people. They still don't care about that. They want to know, are you raising rates? So yes, we are having to look at raising our rates for the 2026 fiscal year.
And what are some of the reasons that are behind having to pursue that?
The main reason is our wastewater treatment plants. Um, just like any asset that you have, whether it's your home, your business, if it's plus 40 years, you maintain it as well as you can. Take your home, for example. You maintain it as well as you can. You fix a leaky faucet, a window jams up and doesn't close correctly. You fix that as you can. Eventually, you got to put a new roof on your house. Eventually, you have to paint the house. That's where we are with our wastewater treatment plants. Our newest plant was built in 1998. It needs some major upgrades and needs some major attention. Maintenance now is getting to the point where maintenance is going to cost more than actually doing uh, the overall upgrades that it needs. So that is what's driving this particular rate increase for 2026, mostly our wastewater treatment plants.
Mhm. Okay. So one of the questions, again from Austin, asks, can SAWS maintain credibility with residents when water restrictions, rate hikes, and billion-dollar projects collide with public skepticism?
Austin's a tough guy. Um, Tell me his question again.
Can SAWS maintain credibility with residents when water restrictions, rate hikes, and billion-dollar projects collide with public skepticism?
Well, water restrictions, for example, I have to talk about the nuance of that. There's never a restriction on the amount of water that you want to use. It's when do you use it. So most of it is lawn irrigation. If you're happy to live in a city where half of the water in the summertime goes to irrigate your lawn, then that's the situation that we're under because we have to meet that demand. This is what our public wants. They want to be able to sustain the biggest investment that they have, and that is their home.
Mhm.
But there's very few people actually that irrigate. It's the newer homes. It's mostly on the north side where the irrigation systems are. And so we have built in, hopefully that shows our credibility, that the more water you use, not only is it going to cost you more, but that gallon, over 20,000 gallons per month, is going to cost you a whole lot more. So there's essentially a surcharge if you're going to be using that water for outdoor irrigation. So they are paying a premium for that service. So I think that helps with our credibility.
Mhm. Another question, kind of related to rates and how much folks are paying. If SAWS has to move its downtown water plant for Project Marvel, who's going to pay for that, and will that affect my water bill? For folks who maybe didn't see this, Project Marvel is the city's sports and entertainment downtown district plan, and I believe it calls for a new hotel on the site of the SAWS chilled water plant. And so I think that's what this writer is asking.
Correct. The chilled water rates are not part of your water bill or your wastewater bill. Our customers are about only 18 different customers. And so those 18 customers, for example, are downtown hotels, the city of San Antonio, because they have a lot of facilities downtown. And so your regular water and sewer rates will not go up. But if you're a resident of the city of San Antonio and the biggest customer of the city of San Antonio, yeah, then you can see where they need to be concerned about that. So the argument now, not the argument, but the plan now is that if we do have to move, and it looks like we will have to move that facility, it's still going to be close by in downtown San Antonio to our current facility. we not only have to move, but we have to totally expand and be able to meet that new demand that Project Marvel is going to ask for. So what the initial calculations are is, yes, it's going to be expensive to move, but it'll be paid for by the increased revenue we will be receiving from all that new development. So just like the argument is that all this new development is going to pay for Project Marvel and pay for the arena, it'll also pay for the move and the expansion of the district cooling facility.
And for folks who aren't familiar with district cooling, can you just explain briefly that chilled water is not what you are using when you
No.
turn on your tap at your home or in your business?
It's actually a function that CPS or others should probably be doing, because it's not really a water function. It's just called chilled water. It's really bringing down the temperature of water and having that water flow through pipes, through different hotels and different buildings, and they air condition off of that. And so that water makes a loop into those buildings and then comes back to our facility, gets recooled, almost frozen, almost like a slush, and then goes back out. And so it's just a continuous loop to provide air conditioning downtown, heart of downtown.
While we're talking about air conditioning, let's talk about kind of the opposite side of that, heating and how it's getting hotter here in San Antonio and Central Texas. How is SAWS planning for climate change affecting water supplies?
Well, we just had our 2025 water management plan approved by our board. And there's a big section in there about climate change, about the different situations that we're in, where we used to see a pattern of rainfall, a lot of it in the spring and the April timeframe, some of it in the fall, the September timeframe, but also, occasional rains throughout the other months. Now it seems like we get a whole lot of rain at one time. So if you still have a 30-year average, but it all comes like in 1 month or 2 or 3 weekends, it's very, very hard to plan that way. But we are planning that way. In other words, part of the plan, for example, is to capture that water that comes in those big, heavy rainfalls, and that makes its way into the Edwards Aquifer, and then pump up to our limit of the Edwards Aquifer and move that water into a different aquifer and store it there. So we actually have a savings account of water that we use during drought times. So like right now, we've been in drought for a while. Our storage of water in this, and it's the largest in the nation, by the way, we've been drawing out of it. So just like when you hit hard times, you draw money out of your savings. That's what we're doing right now. When we have good times, when you get a raise in your household and you're able to put more water in savings, more money in savings, that's what we'll do when we have a series of wet years. We will put more water into this reserve that we have.
Mhm.
So that's part of the way we manage that.
And that aquifer storage and recovery facility down in southern Bexar County, I know you're also looking at expanding the capacity there. Can you tell us more about that?
Um, yes, that is part of what our board voted on earlier this year, was a project in southern Bexar County where we currently have that ability to store water. So when we do that, when we expand that, we need treatment facilities. And so this expenditure is to be able to treat more water that is stored there, because we not only store water there from the Edwards Aquifer, we also pull out water from the Carrizo Aquifer. That has to be treated. It's not as pure and pristine as the Edwards water. If you use Carrizo water without treating it, for example, in your laundry, your white shirts come out pink. So we have to take manganese out of it. And so it's to expand those supplies that we have in southern Bexar County.
Thank you all for all your questions. As a reminder, if you have questions you'd like to ask, use the Q&A button, not the chat function on Zoom here to ask those. Another question that we have here from Deborah: What specific measures is SAWS implementing to safeguard community water resources in light of the anticipated arrival of data centers in our area?
Well, if a data center comes in and it's in our certificate area, we have to, by state law, provide them with water if we have that capacity. Now, we do have some restrictions on it, and obviously there's different things that have to happen. But the key to that is that they use a whole lot more power than water. And so our sister agency, CPS Energy, is not rolling out a red carpet inviting data centers to come in. So I think you have seen probably, at least in our jurisdiction, no new data centers coming in. So I don't think that that's an issue that we have right now on whether or not we can pick and choose what industry comes here. That's for others to do. Um, so it's a combination of the current economy dictating that they're not locating here, and um, the power generation that's needed, and our city folks, our city council is not looking for data centers to locate here. So I think that issue is resolved for this area.
Mhm.
There's a big, huge one in Taylor, which is right north of Austin, where they got a $245 million grant from the state to build data centers there. That's a big concern
Mhm.
because their water supply is more limited than ours.
Right. I know we're seeing them go in, I think, San Marcos and Medina County. But it sounds like from what you're saying, you don't feel like they're coming into the SAWS boundaries and jurisdiction at this
Correct.
point. Is that right?
Yes.
Gotcha. Another question here from Austin again. Uh, The stakes for SAWS are higher than ever, delivering for explosive growth while guarding against wastewater failures. One major plant failure could ripple across Bexar County's public health, environmental stability, and community trust. What contingency plans does SAWS have if a major wastewater treatment plant fails during peak growth?
Well, wastewater treatment plants do not fail. Um, the problems that would occur at wastewater treatment plants, for example, if the power is out, and that's our sister agency. Um, but there's ways to do that. We have, if you look at our wastewater treatment plants, when the wastewater comes in, we have holding basins that can hold sewage as it comes in before it comes into our plant, and we can hold it there to fix whatever problem is happening at our plant. If power is out, obviously CPS Energy knows it's an emergency and they need to address it right away, and they do. We have very good relationship with CPS Energy, and so we can get the plant running again, and then let those basins drain into the plant. Now, the biological features of a wastewater treatment plant um, happen naturally. So a lot of times, even though you don't have power, that treatment is still happening because again, it's just microorganisms doing what they do. They eat what they eat, and then we starve them by taking oxygen away. You don't need power for that, and so it still happens. But tell Austin that he needs to give me a call, and I'd love to have conversations with him. It looks like he's very interested in this. Maybe we'll hire him if he's looking for a job.
Um, let's see here. We've got a couple more questions coming in. Um, on the topic of reusing water, treating that wastewater and reusing it, we have a question here. El Paso is working on toilet to tap to reuse water. Would SAWS ever consider that?
Right now, we are reusing a lot of our wastewater in the sense that we clean it up to a very, very high standard. It's not drinking standard yet, and we pump it back into San Antonio. We have the nation's largest recycled water system. That recycled water goes to CPS to keep the lights on. It goes to different universities to irrigate their lawns. It goes to Microsoft, for example, to cool their systems there. It goes to the city of San Antonio to keep the San Antonio River flowing in downtown Riverwalk area. Toyota uses a big chunk of recycled water. So for industry, it's very, very important that we have this recycled water. Will we have to go from what is called toilet to tap? We're not looking at that right now. It is not in our immediate plans. And by immediate, I mean 20 years. And if you look at our water management plan, 50-year plan, it's not even there. So it's not there today. If our cities continue to grow at the pace that they're growing, we may have to look at it. But again, um, don't be afraid by that vernacular of toilet to tap. If you live in Houston, Dallas flushed their toilets and goes into the Trinity River, and then Houston picks up that water
Mhm.
for their drinking purposes. So it's not and by the way, El Paso's not going straight from toilet to tap. They're putting that clean discharge into an aquifer where kind of a solution, what's that phrase?
Dilution is the
Yeah,
solution.
a little bit of that goes on, and then they bring it out.
Mhm.
I think that's the way they're doing theirs right now.
Gotcha.
But yeah, that's not a bad concept. Uh,
I think you pretty much addressed this, but I'll just read this question from Andrew. Um, can SAWS encourage purple pipe water, that's that recycled treated wastewater, for data centers? And it sounds like Microsoft is already using that for those. Is that
yeah,
correct?
yes, and data centers are willing to use that recycled water. Um, because fresh drinking water, you chlorinate it, put fluoride in it, and it should be used for those indoor purposes. So if they can use recycled water, they will use recycled water. They may have to treat it a little bit more, but if it's just for cooling purposes, yeah, that's perfect for cooling purposes. For example, Toyota uses it, but they still have to refine it before they actually put it to use.
Mm, great. We have a couple questions related to a different topic that I know has been a very hot topic over the last year or two: water loss, the amount of water that gets lost when pipes are breaking, leaks, things like that, which has happened a lot because of all this drought. So Tom and Andrew are asking about how is SAWS going to reduce its losses of unaccounted water, and what volume do you think can be saved, and how does that benefit ratepayers?
Well, this is a problem that the whole industry suffers for. For example, every city has potholes. You'll never fix every pothole in town because as soon as you fix 10, 10 on the other side of town occur. So we have almost 8,000 miles of underground pipe. At any time, any 1 inch of that can break. They tend to break more often when there's a drought, and we've been in drought because the ground shifts, it contracts and it shifts a bit and it breaks the pipe. Our pipes are under a tremendous amount of more pressure during the summertime because of the demand that everybody has during the summertime. So those happen. So what have we done to address it? First of all, we're very unique in Texas in that we are miles ahead of any other city in how we are addressing this problem. Uh, Something as simple as hiring more crews to go out and get to a leak and fix it. The summer of 2023, which was a very bad summer for us, our crews could not get out to some leaks for 2 weeks at a time. And people would call it in, they would see the water leaking out and into the street, but we couldn't get to it because we didn't have enough crews to get to it. We hired more crews. The response time is way down to a very manageable level now. We have put more crews into leak detection where it's proactive, where they're actually walking up and down the street with stethoscope looking things coming out of their ears, listening for leaks. And if they hear one, they report it and we come in and fix it. So a lot of expenditures in that way. And so if you look at our history since 2023, it was a peak, but our 12-month rolling average, for example, of the amount of leaks is trending down. And so we see that we are addressing it the right way. We're seeing very quantifiable results in how we're getting less and less water to escape our system that's essentially wasted.
Mhm. I think part of the question that Andrew had asked was about, how much water can be saved from that. How is SAWS setting targets for where would you like that number to be?
Our this is people are accustomed to per capita use of water, but that's a human endeavor. How much can we reduce it? So we have to influence our public to use less water by addressing how they use the water. In other words, irrigation, that low flow toilets, washing machines that are very efficient. We've done all that. That's the way. But this particular issue is gallons per connection per day. So it has nothing to do with human nature. It has to do with your infrastructure. So can we reduce the amount of gallons per connection per day? And connection is essentially one home, one business. And so our goals are to reduce that, and we have been through that 12-month average that we're talking about. And we have set ourselves a goal over the next 5 years, 15 years, 20 years to continue to drive that down. The further out you go, the more aspirational it is because you don't know what's really happening. You don't know what new innovations are going to be. But our goal is to drive it down. And I would ask some of our listeners to look at other cities and see what they're doing. And you'll get a lot of blank stares, a lot of blank, I don't understand. It's the status quo. And so this problem has been ongoing. I have taken the opportunity to look, for example, at any month, you take any month since I've been at SAWS, and on that agenda for that month, you will see us addressing lost water. So when we change out a major water line, we're doing it because that line got old and is susceptible for breaks.
Mhm.
And so this is a constant amount of money that we have to spend today and every month into the future. You will have to have money being spent on line replacements. And that addresses a lot of this lost water.
Some questions here about the rates, and I think some of them are the answers that we don't know yet. But Kristen asks, how much more are customers expected to pay extra in the 2026 year? And can you talk about how you all will come to those rates and develop those?
Um, Right now, because we have new board members coming in, because we have a new council coming in, what we're asking our board to do is to vote on an interim budget that will just cover the first part of 2026. And then once all that is settled in and we go to council for a rate increase, we will then know what our budget is for the full year. So we predict that our needs are going to be anywhere from the 5% to maybe the 8% range increase in water bill. Our water bills are the lowest in Texas, with exception of Dallas. Dallas and San Antonio flip every like 2 or 3 years, but right now we're very competitive. We are the lowest of any city in Texas. And we compete with Dallas for that distinction. So our average bill is about $65. So you're looking at maybe a $3 or $5 a month increase to address these huge monumental things that we have to address, such as the wastewater treatment plants that we have to do, such as lost water. That's our other big initiative, is to address this lost water issue.
Mhm. We talked a little bit about irrigation, and there's a question here. Does SAWS have a position on the use of artificial turf for homeowners and businesses?
Well, it's great if you want to make that expenditure. What we would appreciate is that it's permeable. In other words, that when rain does hit it, that it goes in, is sucked up by the ground and makes its way hopefully to the aquifer. Um, but what is unique about SAWS, for example, our business model is to convince our customers to use less of our product. Tell me how the Express News can survive if you try to convince your readers to buy less of your product, to click less often on your website. But that is our business philosophy. So if you want to put turf in and you want to save water that way, that's what we want, is you to save as much water, because that is our business philosophy. It's a very unique philosophy that I challenge any other business to do what we do. And that is restrict your access to our product when you want it the most. When you demand it the most, that's when it's restricted. Water restrictions. When there's no demand, that's when we offer it to you with no restrictions when it's raining. Despite all of that, we have the lowest rates in Texas. Despite all that, we have the highest credit rating we've ever had. Despite all that, we are judged by failure or success every minute of the day. Every minute of the day. We either succeed or do not. Sometimes we have a broken line and your home doesn't have water for a couple of hours. And so we try to address that as quickly as possible.
Another question kind of related to the landscaping and irrigation side of things. Curtis asks, is San Antonio considering offering rebates for composting and mulching residential yards like LCRA is doing in the Austin area?
No, LCRA is miles behind us in those kinds of programs. I will ask him to either call or look at our website, and we have a whole lot of different programs that will help our residents buy less of our product, whether it's mulching, whether it's plants, whether it's taking up turf, whatever it is, we have programs. And if you have a business and you have a unique way of wanting to save water, we will develop a program for your business, unique to your business, that will have you use less water. And so dentists, for example, we've worked with dentists, we've worked with hospitals, Coca-Cola, HEB, we've worked with all these big employers for them to use less water.
We have a question here related to the digital meter installation. So before I ask it, can you talk a little bit about the smart meter project and how that's going and where that stands?
We have about 600,000 meters in the ground. And every month, each one of them had to be read so that we know how much water you use so that we could bill you. We are about 90% complete in changing those meters out for digital meters. Those digital meters will measure the amount of water going through that meter, send a signal to CPS Energy. We're working with CPS on it. And CPS Energy, we use their platform. They, in turn, send that information to our headquarters, where we use it to know how much water each home used and then be able to bill it. So we're about 90% complete with that new infrastructure.
Is that a money saving will that save money in the long run, and how does that affect, I guess, the budget side of things, with the, I guess, reducing resources to read meters is what this viewer is saying, and quicker responses to leaks?
Um, there's a tremendous amount of data coming in off of those AMI meters. And the unique thing about them is that we know now where there's leaks. So the homeowner, instead of waiting until the end of the month when they get their bill and all of a sudden it's spiked and they know there's a problem, they call us, or they know they walk around their yard and they see a little puddle, then they know they have a leak. Now you can know hour by hour what your usage is. So if you see a spike at any time that's out of the ordinary, you know you have a leak somewhere. So sometime if you see spikes at 2 a.m., sustained spikes, you know you have a leak because you're probably not using water at 2 a.m. You can see peaks when you come home from work or early in the morning when you wake up. And so that kind of information that our residents now have can help them save water and therefore save on their bill.
That same viewer has a question, and I don't know exactly what they're referring to, but I'm hoping you do. Is SAWS making money on rental and leases of communication towers at your water tower locations? And how is that a mitigating expense to keep rates from going up?
No, we do not lease our towers out for telecommunications because they compete too much with our telecommunications. If you look at our towers, they have little antennas on there. Those are for our purpose to know how much water is in the tank
Hmm.
and to give us other information that our employees use in their everyday activities. So no, we don't lease those spaces out to private companies. If we did, that income would be so marginal that it wouldn't really compare to what our expenses are. You know, we have $1 billion budget. $1 billion comes in and we spend $1 billion. So it would be marginal. That's a good question.
We have another one here.
We also don't rent out the sides of the tank to advertise on.
Are other places doing that?
Oh, yeah. Well, they usually advertise their high school.
Okay. Um, Another question here to go back to something we talked about a little bit before. You were putting that recycled water in the San Antonio River. I know it goes in Brackenridge Park. This viewer is asking, other cities like Austin, San Marcos, and New Braunfels allow residents to enjoy natural water. San Antonians want this opportunity to experience that. Is there any possibility we could see fresh water in Brackenridge Park?
Well, define freshwater. What is freshwater? And by the way, we don't have any jurisdiction over that. That would be the San Antonio River Authority.
Mhm. Let's see what else. Thank you all for all your questions. We've got some great ones coming in here. What does SAWS have to say about the idea that Texas is running out of water?
I don't want to say I told you so, but I will say that if you go back to the 1990s and the early 2000s, uh, we succeeded because we failed so often. For the readers that have been here a while, they know about Applewhite 1 and Applewhite 2. Those were two failed attempts to get additional water into San Antonio, and they probably were bad projects anyway. SAWS had a project with LCRA and GBRA, well, one specifically with GBRA that fell through. We SAWS had a project just with LCRA where we spent millions of dollars getting ready for it, and it fell through. So those failures we learned from and did things differently now. So when I got there, for example, that Church Seguin pipeline we talked about, we were going to build our own pipeline. But Church Seguin wasn't using their entire pipeline. They overbuilt. And so we negotiated with them to rent their pipeline. So we saved ourselves $88 million in not having to build our own pipeline. And by the way, Church Seguin were able to lower their rates because they had income coming in from us. So those kinds of things are happening. And I lost my train of thought. What was the question?
What do you have to say about the idea that
Oh,
Texas is running out of water?
so from those failures, we learned. And so and we have fought those battles that the rest of the state is fighting. For example, in East Texas, the rule of capture is still the rule throughout Texas.
And for folks who aren't familiar, the rule of capture relates to groundwater. It's that you can pump as much as you want under your own land. Is that right?
Right. If you own a piece of property, put a well in it and you can draw out all the water you can, even from your neighbor right across the fence line. And so a big financier from Dallas bought a bunch of property, a bunch of acreage in East Texas. He owns it now. He has the right to drill wells and to draw out that water and move it if he wants to the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So all that has happened. But here in San Antonio, in this region, we addressed that already through legislation that our Edwards Aquifer, there's only a certain amount you could ever take out of there. There is a max amount. And everybody has decided how much you get, how much you get, how much San Antonio gets, how much the quarries get, how much the farmers get. So all of that. So the rest of Texas, in my opinion, has to look at San Antonio, see what we've done with water conservation, where we are using roughly the same amount of water today as we did 25 years ago, that we have the nation's largest recycled water system. Every other city can build one. We already paid for ours. We already are using unused water. That's brackish water underground. This brackish aquifer goes all the way from Mexico to Arkansas. Anybody can tap into it. We did it. We spent the money to do it already. And so the rest of Texas should look at San Antonio, look what we've done, and copy what we've done. It costs money, but you have to bite the bullet.
Another kind of water supply related question that came in here. Are we going to need more massive billion-dollar projects like the Vista Ridge pipeline? Are those coming in the future?
You know, the unique thing about that question is I can't say yes or no, and I shouldn't say yes or no, because first of all, I don't know. But if anybody tells me at what pace we're going to grow as a community, I will be better able to answer it. But guess what? We have to plan today for that worst case scenario, that we are going to grow, that we are going to have people continuously come into this area. And so any one of these water projects that I mentioned take at least a decade from start to finish to get online. So we can't get caught. We can't be just in time kind of a situation where, like the power industry, if you need power today, you can buy it from Houston and it shows up here in a matter of seconds in San Antonio. So you can't do that with water. So today, our planning is a worst case drought scenario, and we have to have water for that one day in August where everybody wants water. Whether it comes or not, we have to plan for it. So we're planning for it, even though it may not happen.
We are going to wrap up here shortly, but take just a few more of these questions. Um, to go back to the rate increase, I think this is something that you've addressed before, but we have a question. How can you justify the rate increase while you are paid a six-figure bonus on top of your salary each year?
Well, I don't set my salary. The board sets my salary, but I get the question. And so it's personal. And so I'll address it somewhat personal. I challenge this reader or anybody else to have brought what I've brought to SAWS. That pipeline I talked about, the reason we were able to use Schertz-Seguin pipeline was because from my time in the legislature, I knew all the players. I knew how to negotiate with them to allow them to allow us access to that pipeline. So the first year that I got there, maybe I should have split the difference with SAWS. Let SAWS say 44 million and I'll get the other 44 million. So it is what it is. That individual, I'm never going to make that individual happy. If he's so concerned about how much I make, whether or not I deserve it or not, whether or not, if you take my salary out of it, if you take all of our vice president's salary out of the mix, we still need a rate increase.
And one more question here related to, we talked a little bit about climate change and planning for that. We have a question. What research is occurring about heat dome effect and that impact on San Antonio? Where does SAWS fit into that picture, I guess, with those conversations?
Heat dome?
Yes.
Well, heat dome, I take it as climate change.
Right.
That we're getting hotter, that we're experiencing more 100-degree a day weather events, longer periods of time. And we've addressed it through our water management plan from the 50-year water management plan, where we look at that trend. We know what our customers are wanting to be, the amount of water they're wanting to be using. Part of our water supply is water conservation, how to have more and different water conservation programs to reduce that per capita use. Other plans in that plan on how to reduce that lost water. So although it's very utility kind of solutions of the infrastructure that we're using and the conservation programs, that addresses that heat dome, those rain events that happen all at once instead of throughout the year. So if that individual takes a look at our water management plan, he will see that that's addressed in more detail that might better explain and more thoroughly explain how we handle that.
Great. And let's see. Oh, we just have one more question here. Sorry, it's hard to keep an eye on them all, so I apologize if I'm missing yours. With the proposed rate increases, how is SAWS balancing the need to fund infrastructure and reliability projects while still ensuring affordability for families and businesses, especially those already struggling with utility costs?
We have a very unique way of helping out. We understand we live in a city that has a high poverty rate. I talk about our water rates being comparable to Dallas. Dallas income level is much higher than ours, so that's still quite different. But we have something called an uplift program, where if you use a certain amount of water, about 2,000 gallons, the water almost comes free. You don't have to pay. All you really pay for is the connection fee. And 2,000 gallons is a lot of water. It's more than it's a lot more than just one shower a day. It's for a family. We take into consideration that 2000 level cooking and bathing and cleaning and the amount of people in your household. Um, but if you find yourself in a situation where you have income challenges, you call our number, and we will qualify you for those programs. And you don't even we don't just wait for you to call. We block walk neighborhoods to sign up people for this program. We work with city council members when they have their events, that we're right there with a table and our computer, and we sign people right up to be able to afford our product. And so we take that very seriously. It's probably the best program in the country. The reason I say that is because if you go to different water conferences, we're asked to explain how we do what we do at two other cities. So we really feel very proud of the way we protect those that can't afford the luxuries of life, let alone something like this necessity.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground. Before we sign off here, is there anything that you want to add or address?
No, I understand there's a lot of frustration with a rate increase. Nobody likes a rate increase. But look at what we've done. As I mentioned, we lowered our rates. We knew that because so many people were moving to San Antonio, that we were getting more income than what our expenses were on the residential side. And we are a public entity, which means that we don't make a profit. We're not supposed to make a profit. If we make a profit, you're charging too much, and that's what it was. Our expenses were lower than our income at that point. So we gave the money back to the ratepayer. So we lowered our rates. So there's that frustration. But I do want your readers to know, especially the guy about the how much money I make, is that we do the right thing. We didn't have to go to council to lower those rates. We could have just squirreled that money away and prolonged this need for a rate increase, or gave ourselves bonuses and salary adjustments, but we did the right thing. We went to city council. We said, hey, because of the growth, we have excess income coming in, lower the rates. 8%. We lowered our rates, 8%.
Well, thank you so much for your time and for being here today. And thank you all for joining us and for your great questions. You can find a recording of this conversation and all of our In Vivo conversations on the Express News YouTube channel. Thanks so much and have a great day.